Go ahead and just kind of jump into this because this is going to hopefully take time because hopefully it will make sense. Now, the one thing we're going to look at, hopefully everybody knows what TDM is, right? Test Data Manager. It has a portal, which this is it right here. But a lot of customers ask, how can I interact with TDM without using the portal or what we call the thick client? Or maybe I want to build something out in the thick client, but I want to put it on our portal, right? So the easiest way to do that is use the APIs. Now, using the APIs can be very tricky. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this webinar. If you go to Broadcom and you pull up the help for TDM, and if you search for APIs, then you'll get this list over here, this REST API references. But here's where it gets kind of tricky. Whenever I'm looking at the APIs, I have a list of services I can use. And some of those lists of services can get kind of confusing, but they're broken down. Now, I didn't do this, so maybe I'm wrong, but to me, they feel like they're broken down by true services, true jobs, right? So in other words, if I want to look at the data model, if I want to interact with masking, maybe I want to look at the orchestration, which is the deployment piece, the publishing piece. This is going to be your basics, and we're going to look at that in a few seconds. Now, maybe I want to look at a connection profile, so we're going to look at a lot of these. Maybe I want to kick off a generator. The most common one, the reason this is called API references and integration is I'm going to show you how to integrate with using the APIs. And best practice that I find, in my opinion, is you'd create a job and you'll automate that job based off what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we're going to look at all this. Now, the other tricky part is if you go to the wizard, the Swagger here, and this is the URL for it. So if you just get rid of all this other stuff right here, right? So it's going to be your test data manager. Now, this isn't going to work for you. It would probably work for a day, but we have our TDM in Azure, our Amazon Web Services. And every time we shut it down and restart it, it changes the IP. And I do that daily. So this IP is always changing. But put in your TDM address, and then that's going to be the service, and then swaggerui.html. Okay. Now we're going to see this a few times. If you don't remember this, always ping me later. You can also Google it within the TDM. I guess Google is a verb at these days, but you can look for it inside the TDM Test Data Manager. And it's right here. Okay. The service name we're looking at is the base service, this TDM. Now let's say if I want to look at the job services, which we will, then I change the service with that name. And this gives me a list. Now, you're going to hear me say this quite a few times. Be careful, because whatever you run is going to be live. Okay. So if I go through here and I delete, well, guess what? I just deleted against my service, right? And this is taking longer than I expected to come up. Well, looks like it's having issues, but that's okay because we didn't need that right now anyway. But if we go down, the other part that's tricky, most of the times when you're dealing with APIs, you're not using tools, even though we're going to use one today. You're probably using a language. What I mean by that is you're not using, we're going to use my favorite, API Strong, or something like Postmon or something like that. You're not going to do that, and you're going to see why here shortly. A lot of these APIs are integrated together. So you need this ID for that ID to do this. And I know that doesn't make sense, but it will in a few seconds. Most people, I'd recommend using something like Python or Java or C# or even C++, some application that's going to call these APIs to integrate those into your environment. Now, one of the main reasons is by default, your token that you have to use expires every day. Now, that's kind of cumbersome. People are like, well, why would you do that? I don't know why they do that. Security, maybe. But if you write a piece of code for it, it's not a big deal. For you to manually come into it, it gets kind of tricky. So let's talk about that first. So the first thing you want to do is find a good Base64 encoder. Okay. And then this is just one I Googled. You can Google it. I've used this one many a times, but keep in mind, you would do this in code. Okay. Java can do this very easy. Python can do this very easy. C# can do this very easy. You don't have to manually do it, but we're going to do it manually today so you can see how it works. Now, I just stood this one up not too long ago. So right now it's going to be default everything. Okay. Now I can take this. That's my default username / password. And yes, I know I'm putting this on a webinar, but like I said, we're going to reset it later. Then I can take this. This is my encoded base username and password. I go over to the TDM manager version. Okay. And then if I look in here, I'll see Authentication Controller. And here I can see user login. Once you scroll down, there's authorization. I paste that in. It may have to say basic, but we'll look at that in a few seconds. We'll try it. And you know what? I think it does. So let's just tell that first. Basic space. And then try it out. See if it works. And like that, I now have a token that I can use today to access TDM. Okay. So we're going to post that over here in our little handy dandy notebook. Now I can go start using TDM through the APIs. Now, you can do everything here. And like I said, be careful. This is live. Okay. So if I found a way to delete or put or post, then obviously it's going to remove everything. Now, the good news is I can come in here. These are a bad example because all these are posts. But if I wanted to maybe do some gets by groups, right, I can do that. And I can just do it straight in here. It gives me a good example. And here, that's now going to be my token. Okay. And I think that's all that's truly required. Let's see. But we're going to do this in a few minutes. Nope, unauthorized. So this one, probably because we're still in the user piece of it, it probably still wants the basic token thing. But we're going to go over and look at another app. And we're going to look at API Strong. Now, API Strong is just an API tool. It's free if you want to sign up, but that's not what we're doing here. So I'm going to log in. The reason I like it is because it has projects. It has this really cool feature called global variables. Now, if I just put my token in here, now I did it earlier today. It may still be the same one. So we're going to try it first. And if not, we'll put the new one in. But really, it's just creating a global variable to put my token API in it. So I don't have to constantly change that. Okay. So let's go look over here. If I do projects, I have quite a few projects. And we're just going to start with TDM. Now in here, let's just do a shortcut, click on APIs, and I can filter by my groups, and I want to see TDM. Now, let's say maybe I want to, let's just test first, and let me see if I can get all projects. Okay, so I'll get rid of the ID. And then here, notice it has the token. So let's see if it fails. Now, what I'm doing here is this is my server. I hope I got the right IP because like I said, it changes every day. I do. And if I go over here and look, this is going to be the service. Okay. So if I go over here, let's see if I can get to this one. And we just paste that in there, but let me get rid of all this other stuff first. Okay. And now that took us to the service. Now in here, I can see things like projects. So I can get projects, I can delete projects, I can put projects. All right, put is just an update, right? So no big deal there. But if I go back over here, let's see if it failed. Nope, it passed. So it was okay with my token. Now here's a list of all my projects. Now, I'm going to use this med site because it's one that I use all the time for webinars and demos. It's just a really basic database system where we have our source and a couple of targets, right? Dev, QA, and stage. Okay. And if I just run, the dev should be empty because we're going to deal with that later. Whoops, sorry, not that. We're just going to run it over here. And actually it's not empty. So we're going to take care of that problem real quick and clear out our database because we want to do this through the API. Give me 1 second while I just type this in there. And I'm going to run this, execute, make sure I'm in dev, not prod. Yes, execute those. And this should be good. And let's see what we got. Oops. Okay, now they're empty. Perfect. That's what we wanted. Now this is our source. We have data from our source, right? So when you think of TDM, you have source and target. Okay, perfect. So now let's go back over here. So we have this med site project. So we're going to kind of play with it. So if I go back over here, now this is why you'd want to do certain things in code. So med site. Now I can see med site has an ID of 2819. Okay. Now so let's scroll back up. And what if I put that there and say run? Now, again, manually, this seems kind of cumbersome, right? Because you don't want to go through here and copy all these APIs down. And that's one good thing about this app right here, API Strong, is that it has a workflow, but that's also why you would do it in code as well. So you wouldn't do these manually because there's a lot of APIs, but here's all the information about my project. Okay. So now what if I want to do something simple like get it by ID, which we just saw? What if I want to look at my profiles? Because now I got to match my database to my profile. Now, again, it's the same thing, but notice our service has changed. Okay. And again, that's why I said it gets kind of fun, but you have to go through here and understand these services. Odds are you're not. You're going to look for certain things you're looking for. For an example, do I use the generator to create a generator? Or does it make more sense to create a generator as a job, possibly, and then as that job, execute the job? Now, that's the way I would do it. And we're going to do it that way here shortly, just because you've already defined all your rules in place. But let's go back over here. So in here, I'm looking at, in here, connection profiles. So let's go back over here and let's just execute it and see what we have. And again, you would have to run this as a bare token and put in your token key. So if you were using something outside the normal of maybe, using code, you would access this directly through a key. Now, we could have done a Java app, but truthfully, this is more visual. You can see this better and it makes more sense. So here, what we did was we said, give me my connection profiles. So if I look to my connection profiles, I can see my databases. I can see, and all these are bogus anyway, so it doesn't matter if you try to grab them. But I can go through here and I can see all the connection profiles, which are the same ones that I would see if I came down here. Okay. Not too bad, actually. So now we're actually getting somewhere. So I can look at my projects. I can look at my connection profiles. What if I want to validate that a profile exists? Now, there's a reason I'm going through this, and you'll bear with me in a few seconds, because we're kind of starting at a base level of saying, okay, I have my APIs. I understand my APIs have services. Okay. I also understand I need to kind of go through these services, which again is right here, to get information back. Now, we could have done it all here, but, well, I'm sorry, all here, but that's a lot of bouncing around. It just makes more sense over here because I can see it. And you'll see why in a few minutes. Well, that passed because I said, do you have a profile by MedSite? And if you do, let me know. It does. Great. So that's what we're going to use. So what if I just kind of curve the ball and said, let's create a project? That'd be kind of crazy. So in here, there's TDM project services. Remember, that's another service. And don't worry, I'm not going to be bouncing around between the services because it gets old after a while, but you kind of get it. What we're doing is we're going to look at a program. Project, not a program. And here we're going to do a post. Now, this is a very ugly string. And I can tell you, it doesn't need all this data. I'm sorry, you're scrolling too much. It doesn't need all this data. So what I normally do is get back a project and I copy the JSON and I match it to this to see what's required and what's not. And then if I scroll down, I can see I need my project info, which is this data right here. That has to be done. But again, you don't need all of it. Okay. That's where I'm talking about compare this to getting a project back and seeing what you need. So in doing that, we did that a few minutes ago. If you remember, go away. I'm sorry, I got the little toolbox up here popping up. If you remember earlier, we got get projects. Okay. So if we took a get project, I'm okay with this one. Let's just run it again. We'll get back a JSON. Okay. And now with that JSON, we can take it and compare it to what the Swagger says of what do I truly need and what do I not really need. Okay. Because some things are good ideas and some things are must-haves. So let's go over and just look at our project. And again, we're here. And if I go to the body, I can see that this is the JSON. Now this is in raw format. So let's just beautify this for us. Okay. And we'll just free online tool. If you notice, I like my online stuff. And now here, let's beautify this. Get rid of this commercial advertisement if we can. And here's the JSON I'm passing in. So I'm giving it a name. I'm going to give it a description and I'm giving it a project name. Okay. This name is more like for your jobs, like it will create a job for you. This project ID is not important. It will sign one for you, created by me because I only have the one user administrator. I can put an email in there if I want to. Start time and end time. So I don't really know the rules behind that, but what I found is if it's not a realistic start time or end time, it does it right away. Okay. And you'll see that when we run a job. Where do all my artifacts location? So I want it to be local, C drive, C, blah, 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 blah. My origin here is generation. And then the rest of this, we're just going to pass through. So I don't care about this. Truth is, I could take all that out. But let's just go over here. Sorry, the little zoom bar pops in the way up there whenever I roll the mouse up there. So let's just see what happens. Fair enough. We're doing a post and go. So we'll give it a few seconds and we should get some kind of message back saying either it failed or it succeeded. So now it does take a little bit longer because in the process of succeeding, it's going to build a project for us, right? So let's give it a few seconds. There we go. And there we go. It created it and it gave us a new ID. I told you don't have to worry about the ID. So this is the name and all that other information was not important. And that's the reason I left it on there. And that's the reason I showed it to you. But if I go over here and let's, what did we call this? Automate, create with API. So if I go over here and look and we just refresh our projects and give it a few seconds to refresh. Because I didn't notice it takes a few seconds to show up on the list, but there it is. Automate creation with project with API. There's our new project. Now, the truth is you could go step by step and build everything you need automatically through the APIs. Okay. I even had one in here for, oh, sorry, it's up here, for creating your, because once you create your project, the next step is create your version. Okay. The version is fairly simple. You need your project ID. So that's why that's important, which I didn't memorize it. So I'm not sure what it is. But again, we can pull back all of our projects and see what it is. But what this will do, sometimes some of these you can click on, you can't this one, and it will show you what the ID is up in the browser. In this case, it's not the case. Let's see if we click on it here, will it show us the ID? If not, then we can just run to get back all projects and do a find for that one. Yep, nope, that didn't do it either. But that's okay. So if I wanted to create the version, which would be next step, all I'd have to do is put back this ID. Now, let's recap, and then I'll give you a better idea. Okay. So what we did is you can look at the APIs. And based off the API services, you can find what job or what task you want to do within TDM. And there's a lot of them here. So I don't know if there's a documentation that breaks these down, to be honest with you. I've always just used the Swagger. Okay. Some things are kind of common sense. Like if I was looking at masking services, that would be a good one. Let's see, get rid of these stuff at the end. Just everything past the HTML. Okay. And then here I can go in here and I can do masking functions, masking jobs, start custom. So there's a lot of things I can do in here. And this is just masking. So if I want to mask something without setting it up or without doing it, well, the truth is you'd want to set up your rules, but what if you want to control when it's fired off or how it's fired off? Well, you can definitely do that through your APIs, right? Now, with saying that though, it is kind of cumbersome because you got to take each ID and memorize that ID to move in the next step. So let's do this. What if we go to this cool thing called workflows? Now, workflows allow you to call these APIs in order. And that's one of the reasons I like this tool. Nothing else, it's a good testing tool before you write the code for it to make sure it's going to work. Now here, first thing we can do, pretend like we need to get the environment information, because I don't want to really make changes in my TDM because I use it for other things too, even though you can. But let's say here, if I want to get the MedSite project ID, okay, with that project ID, then I can get the version ID, okay, by passing in the project ID. Now I'm hard coding this so you can get a visual, because remember 2819 is our project. So you can get a visual, but the truth is you can make these parameters just as well as we did this one, and you can make it as your return Like here, if I click on this, I can hit return variable and I can make this my return. But in this case, I hard code it so you can see what each one is. Because once I get the project, let's go down here. Once I get my project ID, then this one right here gave me my version ID. Now I can get my environment information. Okay. And now I want to get the details of that environment, which in this case will be 404, which is what's returned from here. Okay. So let's see this in action. And this is going to take a few seconds to run. So I'm just going to say execute. And again, I like to recap just so those who are on the call, if I bounce through something too fast or something like that, then you hear me repeat it. Another thing too is it's good to get it stuck in your head, right? So to do the APIs is very simple. Go to the API list, find the API service that you're looking for, and then just figure out what kind of task you want to do with that service. Sorry, I've been talking too much today, so I had to take a drink of my coffee. Now here, what we have is, it's almost complete. So we got the project, which is here. Based off the project, we got the project ID, okay? We passed the project ID, let me go over here, to the version ID, to the version, which allowed us to get the version ID, okay? With the project ID and the version ID, we're able to get the environment, which its ID is 404. And then down here, we get all the details of that environment. Not too bad, huh? Now, the downside is, what if I wanted to automate this? All right, sorry, like I said, I'm kind of dried throat. But let's say if I wanted to actually make this useful, what if I want to do something? So if I go over here to my med site, I can come down here and look, I've got a generator. Now this generator has rules, okay? These rules are, we've got our three tables, our adjuster, our claimant, and our claim. And I'll just kind of click on those so you can see. And these are what I mean by the rules, right? Data Painter, hopefully you all know how to do this. If you don't, we have videos out there for that. But the point is, I've already set up this. And what if I want to automate when this is kicked off? Now, I can do that with an API. If you go over here and look at your submitted request, and if I go down to generators, because that's what we're going to be creating, I notice my last one is 913. Well, back over here in our little API list, what we want to do is we'll go back to APIs. And we'll go ahead and change this to jobs. Now, I can get job information. So if I want to know if a job is running, 909, well, what's the last one? That's it was 903, 913. So we'll just say 913. I don't know if that's my token because I think I did do this earlier today. But just to be safe, let's just do this. And we'll say run. And that's going to get the job ID. Now, the cool thing about the jobs is everything in TDM, loosely, everything is a job. And what I mean by that is when you're creating PII, if you're doing data generation, which you'll see in a few seconds, if you're doing any kind of task, it has a job. So in this case, I got the information on this job, okay? Now, what if I want to run a job? So let's pull this up, make sure my token is correct. Now here, we want to do a post to the body, and this is all it needs. So we'll put this over here. Oh, I didn't like whatever I did. Oh, maybe I didn't copy that very well. So let's go back over here and let's do it old school style. Copy. And now let's see if I paste it. Nope, for some reason it doesn't like that JSON, but don't really care because you can see there's a name, a description, the project ID, the version ID, okay, because remember you need those, and you could, my best recommendation would be to automate those. This is a published job, okay, because that's what we're doing. And now here's the schedule time as well, and showed you. Now it's using Unix time, and that's really ridiculous time. You'll see that soon. Contact me when it's done. And then the generator ID is here. So it knows which generator it's doing. I'm publishing to target, okay? And then here's my target profile, because remember earlier we were able to get the profile. And I want you to repeat 100. Now I can change this number to anything, but that's how much data I want you to produce for me. Now let's go ahead and kick this off, because this does take a few seconds to run. And then once it gets going, like if you were building, say, a Java applet, or maybe even a front end, let's keep it simple. Let's say that your company wants to use their, well, here you go, message job successfully submitted. And our new ID is 914. So let's go over here while I talk, and let's refresh. But let's say your company, it takes a few seconds to show up. So there it goes, 914, it's shown up. And remember that non-realistic date, 1970? I think TDM is smart enough to say, hey, that date's way past. So we're just going to start it now. And that's what happens here. At least that's what I've noticed. And if I'm close to that time, then it actually fires off on that time. So I think what it is, if you give it a date in the past, it starts now. If you give it a date in the future, it will start in the future. But the point is, what if your company has their own portal? Okay, because I get asked this a lot. What if you're writing a code, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how this integration can work. What if you're writing some code that just needs to generate some data for test purposes or for developers? Well, I can create that here in a generator, and then they can fire it off whenever they need it, right? They can write a Java applet or any language, basically, that can call an API, which is almost every language today. So our job has started, which means if I cheat and go over here, I might start seeing some data up here. I do. So there's 8 records already, 9 in that one and 9 in this one. So now our job has been fired off to an API and it's running. Okay. So it takes a few minutes because we're producing 100 rows of data. Now with seeing that, I'm going to recap just a little bit. Taking the API is fairly simple, and I keep coming back to this so you can take a visual snapshot of this. But again, just go to TDM, Broadcom, TechSport, or TechDocs and Broadcom. And once you do that, you can just search for API. Okay. Once the API comes up, click on it. That brings you to here, which really puts you at the parent. Okay. And that has the Swagger there as well. Most important is your server name, your port. This is your TDM server name. Okay. What your TDM thick client, if you will, is what I call it, where it's running. So if you get portal running on a different server, it's not that one. It's going to be wherever the thick client parts of the TDM are running, the port, and then your service name. And these are the service names. Okay. The service name may take you a few minutes to figure out what you're getting to, but once you get there, you're pretty much golden. For an example, we're looking at the job service now. Now this kind of took a while to load a few minutes ago, but there's a lot of things you can do with a job. So we'll go ahead and there we go. And we'll pull the job engine. For an example, I can even cancel a job. I can download the artifacts from a job, and I can resume a job. So if I need to pause a job, or if one canceled, right? If I get the status of one and it's on pause, let's say if I scheduled one for, I don't know, a week from now, but I needed to run now, well, I can easily do that. Okay. Let's go back to our TDM, which is here, and we should be about done. Nope, still working. Let's see where we are. Oh, now it's complete. So let's look at the download log. So I'll click that, we'll download it and pull this up. I can see my 3 tables were data generated, synthetic data created, and it basically did 100 rows of each. So you can see right here, 100 rows, 100 rows, and 100 rows. So if I go over here and run again, we should have 100 in all 3 of these, and we're good. So that is a very realistic scenario to where you would want to use an API to do something with TDM. I recommend running a job. Now, the reason I say that is because it gives you the flexibility to come up here and create the rules. Then once the rules are created, create a published job, which means at least publish it once. So you have a default target and everything to go to, then run it through an API. Okay. The reason I say that is because you have to have a default publish, because if not, the job's not going to know where to go to. Now you can tell it otherwise. You can program that. That's a little bit more information, but basically you would change the JSON data that you're passing through. Best practice is just to have one, and they call it a published job already. The truth is just do one publish. Even if it's one record, go back and delete it. Then you're all set up because it wants to know what is your default. And notice here, my default is nothing. My source is 1, my publish is 2. My default is to go to these 2 when realistically we went here from here, right? And we did 100. So if I was manually to do exactly what we did, it would be this right here. Okay. But the reason mine was different is because I had it in the JSON. I told in the JSON that we want a published job. I want my, let's see, I want my target to be this, and I want my source. Well, let's see, data target profiles dev, source profiles MedSite, and I want you to repeat 100 times. So if you do that, then you're golden, right? So I would truly recommend, if you're integrating or calling something new, that would be the way to go. So I know the next question is, all right, Tim, prove it. So a while back, I did a webinar of all the DevOps working together. And in that scenario, I use CDD. Now, if you don't know Broadcom's CDD, it's Continuous Delivery Directory. And it's just a way to orchestrate a lot of calls based off your processes. Now, I'm not going to go over this because it's not what we're talking about. But in Dev, I created a virtual service, right, automatically. But look here, generated data from a development TDM. So what does that mean? Well, in administration, you make your connections. So here, if I go to my endpoints, and if I go down, I'll see one called probably Tim TDM, really bad at naming conventions. TDM API. And if I scroll down, here's my user. Here's my API. We're using the TDM job service, jobs, and here's my bear token. Now, this was, I don't know, a couple of months ago, so that token is no longer valid, but all I could do is copy mine over, my new one from today, and it will still work. And if we close that, go back to my release, and then click on here, it's a REST call. I'm pointing to that API, and here's the JSON. Now, this is very similar to the one you saw today. It's a little bit different because I think it's a different project or something, and it may be the same. I don't know. But the point is, all you'd have to do is pass this in. Best practice in, you would automate this project and version number, and you can create a new version or a new project with a new version and kick off a task for it. Kind of cool, huh? Then here, once it does that, it kills everything. So down here, it stops the service. It goes to QA. And then in QA, I do the same thing. So generate data for QA. And now if you notice, this one is QA, not dev. And that's how you would use this in a real world scenario. Again, once I get my connection, most importantly, what is your API that you're using? In this case, I'm using the API generator one. The job generator one, and I'm passing in this JSON. Now, if you're using CDD, or if you're using ARD, or if you're using any other product, that all you'd have to do is know this URL and pass these in. And again, in the best practice, I have a lot of this hard-coded. Number one, part of it's being lazy because there's no point in me figuring it out. But most of it is so you can see where these IDs come from. And based off of that, you'll see why I went back over here to, let's get back to API strong. Again, the little bar here is in the way. I don't know if there's a way to drop it to the side or the bottom. Maybe I'll figure that out next time. But that's why when we first started, I was showing you all those different types of APIs, right? So we looked at the create table. Let me see. Let's go back to here. So we looked at getting the projects. That would get you the project ID. And then you can put in the project ID to get more information, right? Hopefully everybody knows how to use get, put, post, and delete, because those are very basic methods, right? Most important is make sure you do your bear token. Some trouble issues I've found in the past is if this doesn't always work, then a lot of times it's because your token has expired. So you have to check that daily. I think it's a 24-hour. It will tell you over here whenever you're looking at this. But the trick to this is it doesn't tell you to convert it to your 64. Well, it does tell you, but it doesn't tell you how. So that's why at the beginning of the video, I recommend something easy like this little Base64 encoder. I just found this on Google. It's very simple to use. All right. And then with that, all you got to do is know which service you're going to, and then try it in the Swagger. Again, just be careful. There are some deletes in here that you probably don't want to run. Let's see. For an example, if I was messing with the model, let's see if model has deletes. Yeah, so there's going to be some stuff in here. Data model. Here you go. Delete data model. If you delete it, it's gone. You know, cancel, confirm, discovery relationships. That's pretty cool. Get the entities. There's a lot of things you can do just on your model. And hopefully everybody knows what the model is, an API. I mean, TDM, right? So that little screen will go away again. Click here. Environments. Yeah, I got an environment. So if I got a data model, here's your data model, right? So you can completely interact with this data model 100% just using the APIs. Okay. So if I want to do a pre-scan, if I want to get the information from the model, right? And a lot of this information, if you don't know where your model is, then remember earlier where we pulled back the environment? I showed you how to do that with the workflow. That's where your model information would be in, because it's going to be part of your environment. Now, with saying that, I want to show one more tool, because this is really APIs. And then we may do a more extent video on this other tool, but I wanted to show you more than just the APIs, because a lot of people aren't really wanting to hire developers just to do the APIs, even though the truth is you don't have to. Most people have developers anyway that will do this, but this is more of a developer's task, not really so much of a TDM task, right? So, but best practices, have it set up in TDM first, and then have your APIs control it. Okay. Now, with saying that, I want to kind of switch gears. So we talked about the Swagger. We talked about the services. The key to that is services. We talked about how to get your token. We saw it run in the project, including creating a project, right? There's nothing there, so it won't pull back. But you could 100% do everything through the API. The key is making sure you get the IDs to work. And that's where a tool like API Strong can help, because you can parameterize these APIs in these global variables up here and just pass it through as it's been called back. And again, you could do it in code like Java or C# or Python or whatever. So the other thing I want to show really quick, and we won't spend too much time on it, is actually a tool called Javelin. Now, the reason I'm showing you Javelin with this is because Javelin, surprisingly, could do this for you as well. Okay. So if I look at this get people is interacting with APIs. And that's the reason I'm showing you this, because you could build this. Now, don't get me wrong. Javelin comes free with TDM, and you're free to use it. It's a workflow from beginning to end. Okay. What I mean by workflow is it runs in order based off your arrows. Now, you can interact directly with TDM, but let's just pretend like I can't. And maybe there's things I want to do that's outside of the realm of what I can do here. Okay. Well, I could always do an API. Now, in this case, this is going to take, I did it in 2 different steps. This is going to call a batch file so if I look at it, it's calling a batch file that's calling a curl command to get back some data. This one's going to call a REST straight out. And here's the REST data that we're looking at. So if I go over here and just pull this up into my browser, you'll get an idea of what we're looking at. Okay, so there's some REST data. Now, the one thing I've heard customers a lot about is that TDM really doesn't have a lot of tools for working with REST. Well, it's because it's a DB, right? It's a database tool. Now, it does have some stuff. You can pull from REST, you can create REST, but it can be kind of tricky at times. So a tool like Javelin can do it very simple. Here we're doing a REST call. And what I'm going to do is this is going to write to a file just so we have proof that we pulled data back. And then what it's going to do is going to loop through each JSON node, and it's going to insert it into this table. So let's go look at the table real quick. So the concept of this one is it's reading this JSON, and it's going to pull all the data into this table called import data, which right now magically is empty. So we'll just run this, and this takes a few minutes to run. So there it's kicking off the curl command. So if you ran it through batch scripts, you can call it this way. And notice these little loops, boop, boop, boop. What it's doing is looping through the website, bringing all those down, and just like that, it's done. So I know you're like, Tim, what did you do? So let's go look. So the first thing I'm gonna do is go into demo, and here's a JSON file. So let's open that up and see what it looks like. So we were able to pull that JSON down from the website. All right, pretty cool. So that's what the curl command created. That's what the batch script that called the curl command created that file. This file was a log from what's actually been inserted into the database. So now let's just go look at the database. And there we go. So what we did was we had a little flow that went to this URL. That's not my URL. This is just a test website that has test data, right? Because this isn't real English or real any language. It's just placeholders. And then we were able, just with a really quick click, download that to a JSON file that can be used. Sorry, I'm looking for my temp. Download it to a JSON file that can be used, but it also uploaded it to a database. Now, with saying that, you could also use that exact same process. So if I look at my batch script, right? Only thing that is using a curl command. If you don't know how to use curl, it's very simple. I'm telling it to execute this. One of these gets rid of all the errors. Don't remember which one it is. We're running the get command against that URL, and I'm bringing it down to this file. Very elementary. You could easily find this on the internet if you don't know how to do it. But the point is, I could easily replace this with one of these APIs that we used over here. Our best case, what I can do with the Javelin is replace my actual REST call, which is here. Now, these are one of these tools over here, or one of these controls, if you will. And the reason I say it's because it has more flexibility. Here, I can tell it to do a post. I can put in the authentication that I want to use. Right now, it's not basic. It's going to be a token, but you can put your basic equals your token thing in there, and that should work. If not, it has an option for a token thing, a username. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this REST little, I call it a control, because in programming world, these are called controls, right? So with seeing that, I'm going to start wrapping it up. We started with talking about APIs, and I started with some very basic APIs. I know some of you were kind of bored at the beginning, but the whole point of that was to show you that there's a swagger that you can get from your documentation that has a list of services. These services do the jobs. So again, if you go back over here, there's a lot of them depending on what you're clicking on, okay? So notice some of these are just massively crazy, right? So you can do a lot of stuff with this. Where clause within a controller, that's pretty cool. And if you look, it's part of your data model. So it's like you can create your where clause just on the fly in an API, okay? Then based off of that, we were able to see some of the best practices, or really one best practice, is to go ahead and create whatever you're trying to do over in TDM. Number one, you have a visual. It's pretty hard to mess it up. Number two, you do have a way of testing it inside TDM. And number three, it's a lot easier to do it here. Once it's done here, then you execute the job. The job can be executed from a third party, which we saw from CDD, or you can do it manually through code, which is what we did through API Strong. And then once we looked at that, just in case you don't have any of those tools and you want to start playing with it right away, you do have Javelin. Javelin is a workflow. The history of the workflow, not take too much time, to the best of my knowledge, it's based off of .NET programming. Really was based around VB, Visual Basic, when it first came out. I joke and say we're adults. We don't program in VB. We do C++, but they did a really great job. That's why you'll see in the listing, a lot of it says VB over here. So if I click on one of these parameters, see, enter a VB expression, but they did a really good job. But to my understanding, this was based off Windows Workflow in the backend. So if you've ever used Windows Workflow, this is exactly the same. But what they did was they trimmed down only the things you needed and added only the things you needed for a database. Okay. But to reverse that concept, we used it for an API. The API could be your TDM APIs. Now, Cami was saying that. I know that was a really fast at the end. That's pretty much all I had. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, thanks for all that info. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box. It should be located in your control panel, or if you prefer, you can click the raise hand icon and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question directly. While we're waiting to see if we have any questions, Tim, do you want to just go over our contact info for us?
Yes, if you're still looking at the screen, this is how you get in touch with us. If you do have any questions about anything I said today, you're more than welcome to ask me. I know I kind of flew through it, but once you do it once or twice, it kind of makes sense. Most of your work is just going to be looking at the services to see all that you can do. What I truly recommend is to map out what you want to do on paper first, then go and try to find the place to go inside your services to make that happen. So, but if you're seeing the screen, this is the best way to get in touch with us.
All right, thanks, Tim. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, so we can go ahead and end it there. Thank you everyone for joining. And if you do think of any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.